Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone, episode 32. This one is called The Flat Earth Debate. You excited for
Mm,
this one, Brad?
it's going to be super exciting. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah. We got a pretty interesting take on it here. We're not here to just present our personal viewpoint and go, well, it's clearly true because of this evidence. We got a cool, unique take for you.
Indeed.
Shall I read the introduction?
Please do.
Here we go. A debate is raging on social media and in homes. Is the Earth flat or is it an oblate spheroid? The academic science, which many say is founded upon unproven assumptions, seems to clearly indicate that the Earth is a spheroid. But there seems to be evidence to the contrary. Both sides seem to have evidence for their argument. But we're not here to show evidence or prove one side. We're here to analyze the debate itself. Something strange happens when a flat earther puts forward their argument to a globe earther. The globe earther seems to go into some angry, disdainful state of unbridled arrogance where they cannot even listen to the flat earth arguments, instead dismissing it all as obviously untrue and completely proven wrong. Why is this? Let's dive into the arguments and see what's happening.
Awesome. And there are countless arguments, aren't there?
Well, yeah, literally hundreds of points of difference that if you take one perspective, indicate one, and another perspective with different evidence indicate the other.
It's funny. I've framed this in the same realm as religion and politics, right? So that, the kind of the guidance is never bring up religion or politics at a cocktail party, right? You're bound to piss off somebody within earshot. And I think flat
Yeah.
Earth is the new champion, and I think that's even more catalyzes more people and is a much more incendiary conversation than even those two things, which is really fascinating from my point of view.
Yeah, to me it seems don't bring up flat earth, don't bring up viruses, and don't bring up the hidden hand drop from 2008. Those will end dinner parties.
Well, yeah, there's a couple others. There's more than just those two, but in general, I found that you get the immediate cognitive dissonance, certainly, which is either fight or flight. The person either is like, I don't want to talk about this, and changes the subject, or they let you know that your tinfoil hat is shining brightly in that moment. There doesn't
Mhm.
seem to be, or it's very rare when you'll get someone who will say, well, why would you think that? Or what makes you think that? Or just, curiosity type of responses. Um,
Right.
And in the few of those that you do get, you state your case. Maybe you have a couple of points you want to make that why you think it's the way it is, and eventually the person will just say, "Well, why does it matter? I gotta get on with my life and pay my bills, so I don't really care." So even for the people who do listen, it doesn't seem like an interesting thing to get into,
Okay.
which is quite
So
interesting. Go ahead.
it is indeed. You wanted to start with a few kind of like prefaces for the argument. You wanted to show some empathy, state where we're coming from, what the point of all this is. Do you want to share all that, Brad?
Well, sure. For starters, maybe people don't understand that all of us were raised globe earthers. So maybe only in the last 15 years has there even been a such thing as a flat earther out there. And that's thanks to a guy named Eric Dubay, who's really the father of the modern flat earth movement, I would say. Started to put some videos out there, maybe 2008, 2009. But I think a lot of people who initially react to think, you're don't realize that you're not trying to get a rise out of them, and letting them know I was a globe earther for however many years I've been alive up until recently. So it's important that everyone realizes that we all got brainwashed into the oblate spheroid, no question, right?
Right.
So another point we were just making is that we don't. Well, I'm speaking for Matt here. He can interrupt me if I say something wrong, but neither one of us have come to a firm conclusion on what the shape of the Earth actually is, and I don't know that anybody has presented any factual evidence one way or the other thus far. But what's clear is that what we're able to see and measure and what we can touch does seem to discount the globe. It isn't what they say it is, and that's perhaps what the raging debate is all about. Where we can't go past the 60th parallel, so it seems, to get to this Antarctic region on our own. We need to hire someone to take us out there, or else have a government escort, and we can't get very high in the sky like the government can, or so they say they can. So we're operating with a very limited amount of information, which makes it really impossible to say for sure one way or the other. What do you think about that?
Right. I mean, yeah, just to comment on the not having a firm conviction. I obviously went all through life being like, of course, the Earth is a globe. Have a degree, first class honors in aeronautical engineering, blah, blah, blah. I can do all the equations for the atmosphere and escape velocity and all sorts of space things, reaching the moon. Did, you know, algorithms that simulate rockets flying to the moon, planes flying all over the place, blah, blah, blah. So I know all of the maths is quite trivial, and it all works for a sphere. Completely aware of that. But then Brad started telling me stuff and he was like, blah, 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 flat Earth's flat, man. I think it's flat. And I was like, no, I don't know. But then you were like, yeah, blah, blah, Antarctica or something. I was like, huh, interesting. And I just looked up like, well, let's see, what's one of the main things here? They say the globe Earth says there's a continent called Antarctica. And the flat Earth people say there's no Antarctica, it's just an ice wall. So I said, well, why don't I go see if I can find video of Antarctica? I mean, surely. Like, how hard would that be? If they can fly to the moon, if they can even put, fly to Mars and drop off, things that crawl around Mars and stuff, surely they could do some laps around the Earth. They could orbit Earth and go over Antarctica and film some really nice video, right? Have like a really good video that just looks this way and that way and just gets really nice shots of Antarctica. Like Red Bull quality or something like that. The quality that you see them film like people skiing around in the Alps. Like you just have epic video from above. But there ain't none of that. There's barely even pictures. There's just things that they call images that are constructed as a mosaic. So that was my introduction to seeing how the science, if you follow it deep enough, you get to a point where every single little thing you go, wait, but what about that? And there's always an explanation, right? And talking, oh, you actually can't fly the satellites over there because it's a very difficult astronomical and atmospherical conditions that make it difficult to fly that way. Plus, it's just not practical. The cost of things, I wouldn't do that. And it's like, okay. You always end up at something like that, right? Where there is an explanation, but the explanation isn't very good, right? And you just have to
Right.
accept it.
Right.
So I think that's the debate that I'm always observing, that the flat earth people are making these arguments and the globe earth science stuff always has an explanation, but it's always like a belief oriented explanation. It's like not a I saw this thing explanation. It's like, oh no, it's because of this reason. It's like, did you see that? Like, no.
Right. It's officially an unfalsifiable claim they're making. I call them critical thought terminating arguments, because the point they make is so you don't think about it anymore. Right. This is the way it is, and that's the way it goes, and get back to playing the lottery and watching sports.
Right. The kind of thing that makes you get to the end and go, ah, yeah, well, I guess so. I mean, what do I know?
If you're not looking for the answer, then you'll accept that
Mhm.
unfalsifiable claim that they make. And of course, just to reiterate, an unfalsifiable claim is, I mean, they haven't proven their claim, but therefore you can't disprove it, right? You're just trapped. Nobody gets
Right.
anywhere on these. So yeah, that's I'll give my personal story here in a second. I want to just bring up, I wanted to ask the question, why do so many people react with, I've been seen a lot of animosity come out of people when you bring it up. And I wonder why, what's going on there. To me, it's some sort of a, like an embedded brainwashing program or something that people would flip out so hard on something that, what does it matter if I believe the earth's flat or not? Why does that upset you so much? Right? Like, what do you care? Right? Uh,
Mhm.
like we can still be friends, can't we? We can still talk or work together or whatever. I just believe the earth's a different shape than you. So why the big deal? And it's people can't really give a good explanation for why they reacted so violently to such a suggestion. And I've come to the conclusion that one is I think the main reason is that it's just too big a lie to possibly be pulled off in most people's minds. Like there's no way that people could lie about this for 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So even just the thought that such a big lie could be told is extremely upsetting to people, unconsciously, right? That's what's going on, I'm saying. And I think there's some
Right.
people that have a lot invested in space too, right? Just in this notion, Star Trek and Star Wars and galaxies and all this cool and crazy stuff that we've been led to believe. Maybe it takes away a little bit of the wonder and awe of the what we've been told is the universe. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that can trigger people about it. Like, just say, for example, you have a friend who's an astronomer and they believe it, and you're good friends with them, and then someone's talking to you and saying it's flat, and you're like, well, it might not come to your conscious mind immediately, but somewhere in the unconscious, you're going to have this reaction like, well, I'm friends with an astronomer, and if they believe, if you're right, that would mean they're wrong and that they're an idiot, and that would mean that I'm friends with an idiot, and I think my friend's right, and I'm an idiot, basically. So
Right.
I think the thing, and another thing is like, it's like, wait, so you're trying to tell me that I'm not even capable of knowing what shape the Earth is, which apparently is obvious. I mean, I can see the boats go over the horizon. You're telling me I'm too stupid to get that right. So I think there's a big intellectual conflict around it as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's probably 50 things, and I'm just kind of looking for the
Hmm.
the big the big answer as to why people get mad, right? It's
Yep.
there are a million other subjects you can bring up that you disagree on, and the other person doesn't get mad at you. They just go, well, I don't share your beliefs, right? There's a simple path forward in the conversation, but for this one, there seems to be something that triggers some animosity in there. I'm not quite sure why it is, but that could be right. Too many people would have to be in on it. Trigger, it's always there. Anyway, this is what we're analyzing here today is why there isn't can't appear to have conversation on this without causing major problems with relationships and friendships and general social status, right? That's what I find most interesting about it.
Yeah. All right. Just to throw in one more, it's almost like uh, if you want to go tell someone that the Earth is flat, but they think that anyone who thinks that the Earth is flat is an idiot. It's like you're going to them and you're saying, oh, I think one of those idiot things. And now they have to deal with the concept that maybe the conflict that maybe you're an idiot. And they're like, oh, what? What are you doing? You're telling me you're an idiot? What is this? Right? Like you really gotta have some empathy for what people are going through here. Like it's a tough one.
Right. Well, especially if they think you're reasonably intelligent on other subjects, right? They think you're
Yeah, I
so
thought you were
smart.
intelligent. How could you think this?
Yeah, that's there. There's something that triggers anger, frustration instead of curiosity. Like, well, why would you believe such a thing, Matt? Right? What would to me? I mean, that's how I would react if I didn't believe. I'd say, well, what in the world would be? What makes you think that? Right? So I'd sit and listen for a minute. And if you told me some really kooky, far out stuff, I would probably say, yeah, you are an idiot. But if you told me some of the things you know now, I'd have to say, well, I find that hard to believe, but that's fairly interesting what you've brought up. Which was
Right.
kind of my personal story, my quickest one for me. And Matt doesn't particularly like mine too much, but I was I just thought about if the Earth is rotating 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and up in North America, it's like 800 miles per hour. It gets slower and slower as you approach the North Pole on this globe that we envisioned. Then you should be able to fly from New York to LA a lot faster because LA is rotating towards you than flying LA to New York. And of course, their argument is that the atmosphere is velcroed to the surface of the Earth, and so it's all going the same speed. And I couldn't envision the container idea, and that for me, that was what tipped me over. Not as a compelling argument for Matt, but that was the first thing
Right.
where I just said, yeah, this is impossible. So it was, from there I started to actually stop and listen to these guys a little bit more, and slowly but surely came around to realizing were making a lot of good points that weren't being challenged, or the argument against them from the Globers was either lacking or piss poor, one or the other. So that was my moment in 2018, 2019 when
And I think that's a good one as well. When you talk about the atmosphere being stuck to the Earth, right? Because the thing that they have an explanation is, oh no, it all makes sense because the atmosphere goes around with the Earth. And it's like, do you know that as a fact, or is that just an assumption that you guys decided and you've made up some math to go with it? Did you observe this? Like, did you experiment this and prove it? So the explanations are always at the edge of, testability or falsification, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, the argument makes perfect sense if you think of it, flying in an airplane at 500 miles per hour when you can sit inside there and drink a Coke and relax and do whatever you need to do because all the air inside the plane is also going 500 miles per hour, right? So that's their argument. But that's, of course, in a contained environment, inside the
Mhm.
pressurized cabin of the plane. And they're suggesting that the atmosphere is also in a contained environment, but they can't show you where the container begins and ends.
Mhm.
So that's where it blew up for me. Uh, anyway, that's not one of the more compelling arguments that most flat earthers make today. That's just what happened to do it for me. So there we have it. Personal stories. Um,
Okay. So we're going to get into some pretty cool stuff here. This difference between knowing and believing. This is going to be really heavy, really cool. Brad, I think you wanted to just give a couple of warnings or prefaces before we
well, yeah.
start
So
mentioning the real heavy content, right?
yeah, for those of you listening who are still in complete disbelief and doubt with this, you know, and this has pushed over a few people that I've talked to, is it's important to note that if you Google this, you're using the Google search engine or the YouTube search engine, they bring up Flat Earth Society. It's like supposedly a club, a group where that you can join, and this is your top hit for Google. But this is some kind of a psychological operation group that they're trying to put forth, a couple of reasonable ideas about the potential of flat Earth with some ridiculously stupid ideas. And once you see those ridiculously stupid ideas, you go, oh, yeah, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So let's say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 people who hear about flat Earth and search it on Google or YouTube, they get effectively what we're calling, disinformation. So the best guys, the 10, 15 best guys out there doing flat Earth research do not show up in early searches on YouTube or Google. What's important to know? Why would that be happening? Why wouldn't they put these moronic flat Earth guys front and center for everyone to see, so that everyone could come to the conclusion that they didn't know what they were talking about?
Yeah,
So,
right. Like, why is there not the videos that the flat Earth people are like, yeah, that's the best one. That's the best one that really proves it, right?
right?
Like, if flat Earthers were to think that about a certain video, then they're wrong, then that would actually be the stupidest video
Yeah, YouTube
that
would
all
want
the
that
globe
front and
Earthers could
center,
laugh at, right? So
right?
YouTube could just put that as a first result, but
Right.
it ain't like that, is it?
No, in fact, Eric Dubé's had his channel taken off of YouTube 3 or 4 times, I believe. And the better guys, that some guys started out just being some podcaster or something, and then slowly eased their way in to flat Earth. When once they got there, all of a sudden their subs started going down and their video views started going down. So they were, they were being shadow banned effectively. So they're still on YouTube. They're just really, really hard to find. In fact, if sometimes to find some of their videos, you have to type it in like character for character, exactly the right title of the video. Like if you miss like a hyphen or a semicolon or don't capitalize a word or whatever, you won't find it.
Right.
Whereas
So
usually their auto thing is usually pretty
sorry,
good
you
at
go ahead, Brad.
finding. I was just going to say, usually with on YouTube and Google, their automatic finder thing, where you get close to the title of it, it'll find it for you, but not in the case with the better YouTube flat earther guys. So another just
If you do want to find it, videos, you should either go to BitChute or Odyssey. Those are probably your best destinations, right?
well, yeah, I mean, there's less deliberate psyop disinformation there for sure. But
Right.
all the content is on YouTube. Your best bet is to go look specifically for the guys that are the best guys doing it. Which I don't know if we'll mention that at the end of here or not. But let's just say 5 or 6 guys that I think are at the top of the game. Eric Dubé is one of them. But there are a few others that you just have to go directly to, find their channels directly, and then you can listen to the legitimate content. That's all. So
Okay.
important to point out.
Okie dokie. So let's go into these. How about we just trade these? I'll do one, then you do one, eh?
Sounds good.
So this is a very interesting section. We've got it titled as Distinguishing Believing the Earth is a Globe versus Knowing the Earth is a Globe. Okay, so we're going to go through some points like boats disappearing over the edge, gravity, NASA images, Antarctica, stuff like that. We're going to highlight what is the difference whether between knowing and believing here, and do people believe or do they know? Okay, so check this one out.
Perfect.
I'll read this one about boats disappearing. When you were young, you saw boats disappear over the horizon, and you were told that it's because they go over the horizon because it's a sphere and they just go over and it's curved and then you can't see the boats. But it has been shown that when you thought they were over the horizon, they were not over the horizon. So people have allowed the boat to disappear out of view, then taken out a really high zoom camera and just zoomed in, and there's the boat, right? So if at that moment in childhood, when you saw the boat disappear over the horizon, you just zoomed in, you would have been like, oh, no, it didn't. And you would have not believed what you were told. So you can see that a belief that exists for many people is literally proven wrong. So in this case, the shape of the earth has come from a belief that the phenomenon of the boats disappearing is caused by earth curvature. But that's a belief, and that is not knowing. What do you reckon, Brad? Is that how to
That,
put these forward?
that's right. It's a function of our eyes. It's the angular resolution of your eyes that causes this to happen. So basically, the horizon and the ground and the sky all collapse into a spot. You can only see so far, but because of the way your eyes are built. This, and typically that's about 4 miles is about as far as they can go. It depends on atmospheric conditions and humidity and other smog and other things, but in general, that's about 3 to 5 miles is the furthest you can see looking straight ahead. And that's just the way it works. And these cameras have better angular resolution than your eyeball. So that's why they're able to pick up the boat that's now out of view of your eyes. They can zoom into these boats 10, 15 miles out. That's the extent of their angular resolution. Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
And this is the one thing I tell people that, they just, I don't know what to believe and I can't believe you and I don't know. And I'm like, good, don't believe anybody. You can go get yourself, you can rent one of these cameras or you can go buy one. They're about $1,000, I think. And you can go do it for yourself. You don't have to believe anybody. You can walk out to the beach or the lake or whatever. And if watch a boat going out, or you can look on, there's apps now that show like Mariner apps or whatever that show where these different barges and boats are coming in and out in the commercial lanes, and you could see that they're 8 miles offshore or 6 miles offshore, and You can't see them with your naked eye, but you get one of these cameras on it, and boom, there it is. See it, from the hull up, you can see the whole thing. So
Yeah, and then go back to your house and sit down with ChatGPT and run through the math yourself and figure it out. Like, what does that imply that you can see it?
right,
What does that imply?
right. A lot of people, the flat earthers, will say, either the ground the part of the earth we're aware of is flat, or the radius of the earth is much bigger than they tell us, which changes everything if that were true, right? GPS and all
Right.
the other things wouldn't work, maps wouldn't work. So it doesn't leave a very comfortable conclusion to draw from it. But that's a great, the easiest one of all. You don't have to believe anyone. You can see for yourself if you want.
And that would be knowing. That would be true knowing, not believing.
That's right.
Do you want to do gravity?
Sure, gravity. Well, we all have been taught gravity since day one, and we all know there's a knowing that what goes up must come down. We all know that. There's no believing that, right? It's the belief part comes in when we're told there's some force out there called gravity. And of course, there's Newtonian gravity, and then there's Einsteinian gravity. We're not going to get into any of the details on that, but we effectively believe in Newtonian gravity when it comes to jumping off a diving board or falling off a roof or anything like that. So we've all experienced it. It's just a question of we have kind of what I always say is the 20/80 rule, or the 20/40/40 rule, where there's some truths, there's some half truths, and there's some lies built in. So it's true what goes up must come down, and it's true that some type of force is causing you to come down. And that's kind of the half truth part of it. There is some force, but then the lie part of it is that mass attracts mass, and at least it's an unproven claim, and it's also unfalsifiable because nobody can run an experiment that demonstrates this because the Earth is so big and massive. So it's impossible to do an experiment to prove this thing called gravity exists. And of course, nobody's ever found this thing hypothesized called a graviton or any other mechanism that makes this mass attracting mass go on. Doesn't exist. It's never been found. Yeah? What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the one that does it for me. The absence of a graviton. So nobody knows that, that's how gravity works because you don't have a graviton. You don't
Right.
have any mechanism, observable mechanism whatsoever. You've got the results that you can supposedly observe, but the causation is just not known. There's nothing they can point to and say that causes it.
Right. I always laugh and tell people, do you think when you run and jump off a diving board in a swimming pool, you think there are these little invisible things that get attached to your body and pull you down to the water? You think that's what's happening? And of course, nobody thinks that. It doesn't make any sense. What was the remember our little Chat GPT experiment we asked them what kind of experiment they could be done to prove it, and it was like two 40-kilometer obsidian spheres or something would have to be hung from
Yeah.
chains or
Like
something.
we were asking, to do the Cavendish experiment, like what would you actually need to observe it? And it
Right there.
was the size of the things was just absurd. Whereas, yeah. But apparently the guy in 1700 totally proved it in his
Yeah, right.
barn.
No one can repeat his work, but he got it done in his barn and his monocle. Anyway, it's we're not here
How
to
about you do the NASA one as well?
sure.
And
Well,
then I'll do
I
the
was just
next
going
one.
to say we're not going to. I'll just say that it's a electrostatics, electrogravitics seem to be the answer. We won't get into those details because almost nobody's interested in them. But that seems to be electrical attraction. Seems to be what this thing we call gravity really is. Anyway, NASA images and moon landing. Oh, good times. You're going to give me that one, huh? So of course we've all seen this. This may be the thing that most people cling to when they hear these ideas, is that we've all seen the videos and images from the lunar landers and the Apollo missions and the ISS space station, and these are obviously these are proofs, and there's no way the government could or would lie to us about such a thing. And it appears that that's not the case in every possible angle we can look at this from. And if you just stop for a moment and think, most people listening to our podcast are going to at least be on the periphery of being aware that a lot of our alphabet agencies are not being truthful or looking out for our best interests. And the question is, why would NASA be the one and only alphabet agency that's looking out for our best interests? That was an interesting thought experiment, if you will. So yeah, it's huge. There's the moon landing conspiracy theories pretty big right now. I'd guess that half of Americans don't believe we landed on the moon at this point in time. What do you think? What's the Australian population like?
Oh, I wouldn't know that, but if I could comment on just this topic for a moment, it's kind of like when you're a kid and, in your deceivable stage of life, they say, space flight, man, it's like spaceships going to Mars and stuff, and NASA is like cool, right? People go to like space camp or something like that, and they like want to be an astronaut. It's like the government agency, like NASA, so cool. Then you grow up, and then government like takes your money and taxes and abuses you in a million ways, takes your rights away, like denies you your rights. But so many people are like, yeah, but like NASA, but they're cool, and everything they say is true. That just I can't get my head around that one. How people wouldn't include NASA in the government and also question them.
Yeah,
Nah,
it
not
seems to
everything
be the
NASA
case.
says is true, apparently.
Yeah, it seems to be the case. And for the record, there are a million videos out there showing that a lot of the video that they have is CGI, right? It's they're using Hollywood tricks and all green screens and all sorts of different techniques to simulate the supposed ISS astronauts floating and doing fun little things with balls and pens and things on camera. Um, pretty easy to duplicate it too. And as far as all their pictures of Earth go, they admit that they are actually composite images. So they're not individual photographs. They say that the ISS isn't flying high enough to take a full picture of the Earth. So they have to stitch together dozens and dozens of different images at different times to produce an image of what they say the Earth is. The
Yep.
only picture
And
they
that's
ever
written
said,
on their site.
right? The only
Like
time they
they
ever said
admit
they
that.
got a picture was the moon, one of the Apollo moon pictures. It's the famous blue marble picture. And
Right.
one of the very early flat Earth researchers, I think he passed away a couple of years ago. His name was Rob Skiba. He was pretty good at using Photoshop and everything. And he got the image that NASA had shared on their website and pulled it down. And there's where the so it's a picture supposedly from the moon of the Earth off in the distance. Like kind of like the opposite of what we see here on Earth. But there was a black square perfectly around the Earth, like it had been pasted into the image that they took. And he had that image and gave it to a bunch of people, but you can't find that image anymore on the NASA website. So interesting trickery happening here, tomfoolery to say the least.
I think I'll just mention as well, just to stick with this theme of knowing versus believing.
Mm-hmm.
The issue here is like people say, "Oh, we went to the moon? We've got images of the Earth from space." It's like, no, you don't have anything, right? None of this
Right.
stuff do you know, right?
That's right.
If they can produce a film like Gravity and show George Clooney and Sandra Bullock going around in space and it looks totally real, any sort of CGI that they want to produce, they can, right? You don't know one way or another whether that's real. Okay, you weren't there when it was produced. You just seen it. You just looked at it. That's all. You've never seen any of this anywhere else other than on a TV or a picture or a cinema, etc.
Right.
Okay, so there is no knowing going on here. There is only believing, and the believing is of a government agency, please.
That's right. In effect, it's impossible for us non-astronauts to know. We could never know. We can't get up there high enough, right? On our own. So
Okay.
nobody can use this as this is a fact. It's all you have to admit that you believe that's a fact, but you don't know it.
Right. That's the important thing we're driving at here. Okay. I'll do Antarctica again. We mentioned it before, but this is through a different lens. Okay. You've seen Antarctica on a map. Sure. You've seen people in the snow, right? You've seen people saying, we just arrived here on Antarctica on our boat, came from Argentina. Here we are. This is Antarctica. Okay. You've seen that. You've learned from history that people went to the South Pole. You can read a book about it, read history books. They say, oh, yeah, and this year, this guy went to the South Pole. Might have seen images of Antarctica, but you have never been to Antarctica, right? I could even pretty confidently say this to people who have been on a boat down there. Say, do you know you were in Antarctica? Like, how, seriously, how on this huge earth do you know that you weren't just on an island near Antarctica and told you were in Antarctica? But even more easily to say to just regular people, you've never been to Antarctica. Okay. You've never seen a flyover from space of Antarctica. So why do you believe just in something that you've never independently observed yourself? Like, I get it. Everyone else believes in it too. But let's say that no one believed in it and there wasn't like this social pressure to believe what everyone else believes. Based on the experiential evidence that you've observed, would you believe that? Probably not. Like, how could you have a stance on whether some big continent observed exists? It's pretty tough. So,
Well, I
knowing versus
mean,
believing.
yeah, I mean, but if you already believe in the globe, then it's easy to believe in Antarctica. It just makes sense, right? There's something down there in between. If you were to leave off the tip of South America or Africa or Australia and keep heading south, you eventually hit this thing. And theoretically, if you had the capabilities, you could traverse across it and get to the other side and take off and end up in Canada or Alaska or Siberia or whatever, right? That's the idea that they're selling us.
Well, it's a good
um,
story.
it's a great story. I mean, it has to be that way in order to sell the story. There couldn't be any other way. But yeah, the problem is that the people that go there, they all go to, there's 2 or 3 spots that everybody goes to where they have, they've set up some buildings and, running water and whatever's needed to survive. So those are the places that you go. And, they're right next to the ocean, basically. So, you're on one side of this thing, but they tell you it's too dangerous to travel inland. And, certainly crossing the continent is just absolutely impossible. That's what they tell us. So, yeah, nobody's experienced it. Now, there's some people claim they've sailed around Antarctica, but there again, who knows what's really going on there? That's sketchy and questionable what's happening. And it's usually just one person or two people that do it. And you've got to take their word for everything. It's more, you have to believe them, just like we've been talking
Right.
about. So, yeah.
And that's why we wanted to do it in this way, like knowing versus believing. Like, yeah, sure, we know that there's people who say that they've done it. But the point here is like for the everyday listener, do you know it or do you believe it?
Right. The old Captain Cook diaries, which are pretty well suppressed, really interesting. And I think this is the late 1700s, mid 1700s, where he tried to sail around Antarctica, and he said, I could never get past the ice wall. So he'd go like 60,000 miles, 3 years. And he said he could never like get all the way around Antarctica is what he thought, which lends
Interesting.
lends itself to the idea that Antarctica is really ice wall surrounding a pond we call the oceans. The continents are islands in it. That's what the flat Earth community suggests. Anyway, good times in Antarctica.
You got your trusted experts here.
Yeah. So there's a few guys out there. Gene Kranz he was the NASA mission control guy who managed all the moon landings. And there's a video of him out there saying literally that their simulations were so good that the real Apollo missions were identical to their simulations. They couldn't tell the difference between them. So this lends itself to the too many people would have to be in on it problem, right? Everybody that was in charge of making sure that they had smooth, moon missions was just looking at computer data basically, and to them it looked exactly like what they had simulated a million times before, so they couldn't tell the difference no matter what. It's an interesting point. Then of course we've got I've seen curvature out of the plane problem. The windows are curved to simulate that a little bit, but then B, we have Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's come out a couple times in the last 10 years, primarily after the Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump, which was, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And he said he saw the curvature, and I forget how high he was, 110,000 feet or something. He did a solo parachuting basically from that. And he had a GoPro fisheye lens on his helmet, so it looked like curvature. But unfortunately, also provided in that documentation was the video from the onboard camera on the the balloon he basically went up in, and it looked flat the whole time from that camera. So Neil deGrasse Tyson had to come on TV and do some damage control, and basically this is where he invented the you're only a millimeter or two above a beach ball, and so he was effectively saying even at 110,000 feet, you still couldn't see any curvature. And of course, most of our commercial airplanes fly between 30 and 40,000 feet, so which is like a third of how high this guy was. So that effectively puts to rest the idea that you can see the curvature from an airplane. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the knowing, like feeling like you know it. It comes from people thinking, no, I've looked at an airplane. I've seen it. I've seen the curvature. But what
Right.
you're pointing out here is that the Neil deGrasse Tyson, the white priest of the globe earth cult of belief, has admitted on behalf of the cult that you can't see the curvature. So if you think you've seen the curvature, you haven't.
That's
Okay?
right.
You just believe you have, but you haven't.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yeah, it goes along with the boat over the horizon belief. I'm not even going to say this next guy's name, but the Carl Sagan and Nova talked about this Greek guy that lived over 2,000 years ago. What was his name, Matt?
All right, I'll just do this part then, real quick. Eratosthenes, right? You've also got Aristarchus, two couple of Greek guys. So what people believe is that the Greeks, with mathematics, trigonometry, geometry, etc., proved that the Earth is a globe. All right, you got Carl Sagan comes on in the 70s and it's fascinating. Eratosthenes proved it, and that's how we know, right? That's most people were just 7 years old and saw Carl Sagan on the TV, and we're like, oh, fascinating. The Greeks with their mathematics, they proved it. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to crush your childhood because I can do mathematics. I'm good at mathematics. I did advanced mathematics for 2 years in uh, university. So, that kind of mathematics is trivial, right? It's not advanced mathematics, it's just very basic mathematics. And I've gone through the proofs that these guys supposedly did, right? I've completely worked through them myself. And here's the bombshell. What they have done is assumed that the earth is a globe. Okay? The very mathematics that has been based upon contains an assumption from the very get-go that the earth is a globe, right? They have assumed that the sun is infinitely far away, okay? And that the earth that the that the moon, right? The shape of the moon that you observe that is lit up is created by the sun infinitely far away shining light on the moon, right? So this is all used, right? Because they have this mathematical model where you're looking up at the moon, and then you've got the sun over here, and you're creating triangles like that, and you're figuring out all this mathematics based on it, right? But they have assumed the shape of the universe, right? So all that Greek stuff is completely 100% bunk because it's already got the assumption in it. And if you don't believe me, Go and do it yourself. Don't just go, oh no, it can't possibly true. Go and do it. You can search the Aristarchus mathematics on YouTube. Just run through it, and you'll be like, oh yeah, they literally assumed it. So it just is nothing at
Right.
all. Sorry, Carl
But
Sagan, but that's nothing.
well, there's two important points to make too. Is that it's not an infinitely far away sun, but I think they thought it was like 870 million miles or something back in those times. So we've been told.
Let me
Today it's
clarify. Can I
93
clarify?
million. Yeah,
Far enough away such that the rays of the sun come in parallel, even
right.
if
That's
you're
right.
hundreds of kilometers away, right?
That's the important part. And so if you
Which is
if you
effectively infinite. Far enough
if you
away that we can assume that it's infinite, right?
right, you can make a different assumption and say the sun is several thousand miles away, and you can get the same results that you see with assuming a 93 million mile away. So you
Right.
could the shadows on the sticks in Alexandria, right? That are different from that's the supposed experiment that was done 2,000 years ago. That the sticks cast a certain shadow in Egypt and in Cairo, and they cast a different shadow in Alexandria at the same time. So this is the trick. And and a couple of people have pointed out that this guy, I'm not going to try to say his name because I never get it right. He only appears in one book in the 1950s, and so his name is seen nowhere else in antiquity. So it's almost as if somebody invented him to sell the idea that we've known the Earth as a globe for 2,000 years. And a lot of people come back with that when you say, hey, you know what? The Earth might be flat. And you're like, so you're saying 2,000 years worth of geniuses and experts are wrong? This is how they sell that 2,000-year lie. But this story, one story is all it
Right.
took. Interesting, huh?
Right. How are we doing for time, Brett?
Yeah, we've got about we're at about 48 minutes.
Um, do you want to press through all of this? Because we'll definitely go, it could go to an hour 20 or so, or do you want to do just a fraction of it and do a part two?
Yeah, let's do a part two. We'll go on for another 10, 15 minutes here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, well let's just continue with whatever we got, and we'll just pause whenever we get to the hour mark. Okie dokie. So we want to talk a bit about how people, like what reactions we observe when people are confronted with arguments, right? We've got this one curvature from a plane, hot air balloon. We already covered that one.
Yep.
Um, well, I think we can still discuss that though. Like, say you say to someone, I think that's important, right? So, say someone thinks that they've seen the curvature from a plane, right? You say, look, Neil deGrasse Tyson has said that you can't see it. Your person, your representative, your big head honcho of the entire movement has admitted that you can't see it. So whatever you think you see, I'm sorry, but you don't see it. I reckon the reaction that I've observed to that is, well, I don't know what to tell you, but I've seen it. Is that your experience too, Brett?
Yeah, I think it's a cognitive dissonance moment for sure, right? Like
Mm,
you're not gonna make any ground in that moment with the person, and even if you say I believe you've seen it, but
mm,
let me reiterate that I know you haven't because you're not supposed to be able to at any height you've ever gotten to. So I think it's just a moment of I can't accept that as a possibility compared to my current belief system, right?
yeah, it's like and doesn't that strike you as like a little bit absurd, like a little strange that there must be something really weird going on with this debate that you would tell them that no, 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 your side actually thinks this, and they don't even agree with their side. That they hold on to complete non-reality.
Well, yeah,
That's a bit strange.
I mean, 99% of the population has never heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say that. So right, he just went on a talk show that maybe a million people might have seen, and that was the end of that, right? It wasn't like the nightly news was broadcasting it night after night for a
Right.
month. So
So
they might
even
doubt you.
there, yeah, even there, the doubt, right? Well, that can't be true. There, well, surely he didn't say that, right? He couldn't have said that. But also the refusal to go and check whether he said it or not. So it's like they don't want to find out. They don't want to know.
Right. Yeah, because that blows up a deep seated belief.
Hmm.
That's right.
We've talked about Antarctica so much, so why don't you drop this one, Brad?
Oh, Matt
Because
likes
Brad
this one.
dropped this one on me just a couple of weeks ago. I didn't even know this. This one's gonna. This is what you're here for. You're here on the mind blown zone, right? This is what you come here for. I guess get
Right.
ready.
Right. So this is unknown to most people, but a lot of people point to GPS as that's definitive proof. Like there's no way GPS could work if we were on a flat Earth because it works on a globe. And of course, GPS is it's code, right? It's a software package that has been designed and created by the United States Defense Department. And perhaps most importantly, it's closed source code. So you would think that they're doing this for the public and they're here to benefit humanity, that they would release the code for all of us to have a better idea of how our world works. But turns out you cannot get access to the GPS code. So it's easy for them to code in what appears to be curvature and roundness, and all the magnetic declination is what they used before GPS. And they basically can stretch out a flat plane into a globe with code, and that's what the accusation is uh, towards GPS. Matt really liked that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll come in here because like people I've chatted with this about to people, and they're like, yeah, well, think about it. They're like GPS. I mean, that uses Einstein's gravity theory. And I was trying to argue like, we don't know whether it does, but at the time I didn't even know. They 100% didn't know, right? Like no one knows how GPS works. Okay. And as you told me, they've said that they use these particular ideas, these particular algorithms. Like, okay, so what we do is, we bounce it off the satellites, etc. We triangulate this from satellite to satellite, blah, blah, blah. Right. But that is not known. That is just believed again.
That's right.
So your suggestion to me was that they just are using the towers, right?
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, they do put satellites on hot air balloons up into the sky and gather some
Sure.
data from that. But yeah, the all the phone stuff that we think we do that goes bounces off of satellites and everything, that's not the case. It's all cell towers. Terrestrial towers is what makes GPS run.
It's interesting how you're like the belief in the globe can kind of like rest on your unchecked belief in GPS. You're like GPS, right? Like you don't even know that that's just closed source code owned by, well, let's say the cabal potentially, or exactly. You don't even check that. You're just like, oh yeah, GPS. Yeah, that's open source, right? Yeah, everyone uses it. Yeah. No, not true. Not true. So sometimes you have this evidence in your mind that you think exists and helps you prove your point. It doesn't.
Right. And that's been
Completely
the flat
false.
Earth movement for the last 10 years is that, a lot of flat earthers will say, we know the globe model better than the globe earthers because we had to go and see what their claims were and figure out how they were misled or deceived along the way. So this
Mhm.
is all of this is a result of people making claims that they believed were true and the flat earthers discovering the problems with their claims. This is just one of the many. It's a biggie.
We got a good one here. This one's really good. The flight paths in the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I have gone to Skyscanner and tried to get a flight, for example, from Johannesburg to Perth or from Sydney to Buenos Aires, right? The kind of flight path that the fastest way to get there would just be to, stay on the same parallel down south and go straight across direct flight.
Mm-hmm.
There has never, being a direct flight, right? It's always like if you want to go from Johannesburg, well, you got to go up to, for example, Abu Dhabi, and come back down, right? Or Buenos Aires, you got to go up to Mexico or something like that, and then crossing down. It's always you got to go north, then across, then down. There's never any straight across south. But I hear the craziest responses to this. I hear people tell me, "Oh no, no." Like I got to admit, this isn't social media. This isn't in real life. Social media, people say, "Oh no, I took a flight. I took a direct flight. They exist. Go check." I'll go check. No, they don't exist. So that's weird to me.
There are a
But
few, but they're
people
very
should go check
specific.
themselves.
Yeah, they're very specific. What's interesting, the few that do exist, if you look at the flat Earth model map, you can see why those might exist because those 2 points on the flat Earth map are fairly close together. Whereas, like Sydney to Santiago or something like that, right? That's like this huge, massive circle. So there's never a direct flight
Mhm.
for things like that. I think like Perth to Tokyo or something might exist, and you fly right over Los Angeles to get there, or things like this that on the flat Earth map you would say that wouldn't work, but there it is. So yeah, it's important to note, right, that almost every time somebody wants to fly from a southern continent to another southern continent, there's always a hop in the north.
Yeah.
The excuse is that there are more passengers to pick up, but you got to wonder about that excuse because if the plane's full in Santiago, Chile, why do you need to pick up more people in London, right? Just fly straight to Sydney, right? Like you don't need to fill it up anymore.
Yeah.
But you
Well,
never,
why not just have half the amount of flights?
right? There's so many other solutions, right? What you don't see is flights from the north picking up people going down into the southern hemisphere and then picking them up and then going back up to a northern destination. So that's never the
Right.
case.
So there's an
So
explanation. Oh, it's not a profitable route for the airlines to have. And, you have to come at this from a logistics point of view. And it's like, well, you're not coming at it from a logistics point of view. You're just throwing that word up and trying to hide behind it. Like, wait, there's never been one flight, like one documentable flight that I can get a video of, or like, well, I can't look at any time and book one at all. There's just none, not a single one, because it's not a profitable route. Oh, come on! Like the
there's
lengths
one
people will go to defend it is just crazy.
there's one interesting case that Max Egan, who is an Australian guy, he runs a channel called the Crow House on a bunch of different platforms. Kicked off YouTube long ago, but he's been a conspiracy realist for 20 odd years. He actually still doesn't believe in the flat Earth. He still basically he says I don't know, but he doesn't side with the flat earthers in any particular way. But he actually brought a compass with him on a southern flight, and it was there were points in it when he's looking at the on-screen GPS tracker that you get on a lot of these big
Mm,
flights,
mm,
and it would shows you a little picture of an airplane and the continents and where you are. And there were numerous cases where his compass was showing that the plane was flying south southwest, but the GPS was saying they were flying north northwest. And he thought, maybe there's something wrong with his compass, even though it worked perfectly before the flight and after the flight. He was wondering if there's something that threw it off during the flight. But the guys that he gave that information to went and looked at what the flight should look like on a flat Earth map, and it was a south southwesterly route the whole way. So
right.
it's an interesting example of tying together the flight routes and the GPS. Right, the GPS was saying basically the exact opposite. They were going 180-degree difference than what his compass was saying in that moment. So
It's a pretty good one.
yeah, interesting. I think we're at a good break point here. So let's call this the end of part one of the flat Earth debate, and we'll be back next week with part two.
Well, maybe not next week. Maybe we've got another one scheduled, so maybe we'll just do part two soon.
Or that.
You'll see a
Either way
part two
works.
soon. Maybe it'll be next week, maybe it'll be soon, but get ready for it. It's going to be even better.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and hopefully looking forward to part two, which we'll do here shortly. Thanks a lot, Matt. We'll talk to you all later.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.